but you have allowed us to assemble ourselves here one more time. But Father, first and foremost, we ask for your guidance, your understanding, your knowledge, to lead us into the path that we need to go. Bless right now. Bless every mind and heart that's here this evening. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, sir. Before we get started, I just want to go over a few things. As I mentioned just a second ago, tonight is our first public hearing for the budget calendar. On Thursday, September the 1st at 5 o'clock, right back here at the Convention Center, we will hold a second public hearing to discuss the budget and to also discuss adopting the millage levy. On Tuesday, September the 6th at 5 p.m. at the Municipal Complex, the City Council will vote to adopt a budget. And then we will publish the results of that on September the 15th in the Columbus packet, the resolution and millage setting the tax levies. We do have to have our budget in place by the 15th. The purpose of tonight is to let the citizens and the department heads and the agencies that the city supports be in on the discussion of putting together our budget for the next fiscal year, which will begin in October 1st. The budget is not just an accounting document, it's a management and planning tool. I want to thank our COO, Jamie Garrett, and our CFO, Jim Brigham, who have been with us for not very many months for their hard work on this budget and working with our department heads. We had a meeting on August the 18th, no, on August the 23rd at City Hall, where council members could come in and talk and have discussions with the department heads on their budgets, and also have conversations with Jim and with Jamie. We've also had council members throughout the week stopping by to look at the budget and have different discussions. So tonight is the budget that we have thus far. We are encouraging folks tonight as we go through the process to give us your thoughts, to raise any concerns that you have, to ask any questions. That is what tonight is for. You know, we're forecasting what our expenditures and revenues will be. We have to have, by law, a balanced budget. And where the budget is at this point, it looks like we will have a surplus of about $500,000 at the end of the next fiscal year. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to our CFO, Jim Brigham. He's got a PowerPoint that he's going to take us through first, and then we'll begin to have discussions and take any questions. Let me say that if you have any questions from the floor, if you'll come up to the mic here so everybody can hear you and so that folks can hear you that are watching online. Mr. Jim?
I think, is it on? Okay. I think it is. All right. Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone who came out. I'm, as the mayor explained, relatively new, at least with the city. And I want to, but I know that this is an important process, and we want to encourage participation from our citizens.
Is that working?
Okay, there we go. So we'll start with a presentation. The first thing I want to do is to talk a little bit about the, okay. In your handout, if you had one, and please feel free to take one, we talk a little bit about what the municipal budget is. It is required. It is a legally required document. It has time bound. It is time bound. We need to have it in place and adopted by September 15th, as the mayor said. It needs to be in balance, and that That's why we work very hard to try to project where our revenues will be and what our expenditures, what we can afford to spend. But the budget is more than just an accounting document, like the mayor said. It's really really a management plan, and that management plan where we work together to determine what is the best use of the funds that the city gets, and when we get those funds, what is the greatest good impact for the citizens of Columbus. And that's what this budget's all about, the citizens of Columbus. Wrong way. Again, this is some general information for those of you who don't know who your city council members are or the mayor. Jamie Garrett is the Chief Operating Officer, and I am the Chief Financial Officer. We have 19 departments in the budget, and we have 290 employees. At some point, we'll discuss this in a little more detail, but I wanted to talk about those 290 employees. Of those 290 employees, one of the goals of the City Council, and all of us, quite frankly, was to get our employees who are earning less than $12.50 an hour up to $12.50 an hour. You know, at $10 an hour, it was just a shame that we have employees that were earning $10 an hour. We have in this budget moved all employees up to at least $12.50 an hour. And I thank the City Council for that. There were about 90 employees with the city that were earning less than $12.50 an hour when we started this process. So where are we at? So the 2022 budget, you can see up there, we had budgeted about $23.8 million in revenues and $23.6 million in expenditures. And I'm pleased to say that revenue is actually running ahead of our budget. Probably the single largest item is sales tax, which you'll see shortly in a breakdown of revenues. And we're very fortunate. The budget for sales tax for 2022 was $9.6 million. We are at just over $10 million now, and we still have 2 months of sales tax to receive yet. The operating expenditures, as you can see, we're less. I would like to say that that's credited to the fact that we did a lot of cost cutting, but as a matter of fact, probably the single largest issue is that we have city employment vacancies in both the fire department and the police department that need to be addressed. And both of those departments are well under budget, and that's really why we're running below the expenditures budget for 2022. It's a good thing. We wouldn't want it flipped the other way. The proposed 2023 expenditure budget is $24.4 million, and the revenue budget is just over $25 million. And we'll go through some slides to talk about what makes up those proposals. So the projection increase in revenue is $1.2 million. It really comes out of two main areas. One is we're proposing a $1 million increase, which is $195,000 through ad valorem taxes. And the other is a projected increase in sales tax revenue of $900,000. Currently, that number is budgeted at 9.6, and like I said, we're already over 10 million. And so for 2023, I have budgeted $10.5 million for revenue for sales tax. Now, you know, one of the good things about having a surplus is that if sales tax gets affected somehow by our economy, we have a buffer there that helps us insulate against going below the number that we're looking. So we have some room to absorb a hit if that happens in our economy. On the expenditure side, we're projecting an increase of $782,000, almost $783,000. The 4% increase for our pay for our city workers came to about $400,000. Bringing all city workers up to a minimum of $12.50 per hour cost us about $300,000 in this proposed budget. It's interesting that we're reducing the size of the proposal is to reduce the size of the police force, but increase the individual pay. In 2022, we budgeted for 99 people in the police department. In talking with the police department, we are going to a new pay type approach. We're bringing the sworn officers, and we've never, and we don't operate at that. We don't operate at 99. Right now, we're, I think, somewhere around 25 or 30 officers. Our plan for 2023 is to set that goal at 55 sworn officers, but to use the same amount of money that we would for that 99 and bring it down and give more pay to each officer. And that scale comes from a study that our Chief Operating Officer gave to us. And what it does is it makes the city more competitive with both the local cities around us and the state. You know, quite frankly, if a police officer goes through training and becomes a sworn officer, they can go most anywhere and find a job. And we want them to stay here with the city. And as a matter of fact, we would like to attract good officers from other cities. And the only way we can do that is to pay. So that's part of that whole plan. We're not really reducing the effectiveness of the police force. We're making it a better paid police force and hopefully a better qualified police force. We're increasing our community outreach to support our youth by $102,000. We have a pay increase for elected officials of $60,000, and that's broken up between, it's proposed, that's broken up between the city council and the mayor. And we've also increased our fuel expense by $80,000. We were well over budget in 2022 so far year to date in fuel expense just because gas and oil has gone up so significantly, and diesel fuel. So where does your money go to? You know, safety and fire gets nearly 50% of your tax dollars, or of all of the revenue for the city, nearly 50%. Public Works, which is the streets and maintenance, gets about $4.4 million. Administration, which is the city hall plus all of our legal expenses, all of our engineering expenses, gets about $3.7 million in total. Parks and Recreation is about a flat budget of $906,000, the same as last year. Community and appropriations, and appropriations are those charities that the city elects to help support, to help our citizens, and we'll probably talk about that a little more shortly. Will be about $946,000 debt. And that, in this particular debt, is not our general obligation bonds. It's really the financing that we have done for trucks and equipment, and that debt is $450,000. That comes out of the general fund. And then the other is actually about 10 departments that are in a wide range of different functions, everything from the convention center to the cemetery to the municipal court. They make up that other amount right there. So the projected revenue, where's the money going to come from? We're looking at $25 million. As you can see, the dark blue up there is sales taxes, and that's $10.5 million. That's by far the largest category. Ad valorem taxes is at $7,675,000, and then we get revenue from light and water, fees and permits, from the county road tax, recycling. We actually make some money on interest in the cash that we hold right now, and then we get other miscellaneous funds. But It's a solid projection, I believe, because the key of the two, the ad valorem taxes and the sales taxes total up almost 18 of that 25 million. I think those are real solid estimates for 2023. So this is the list by department. I apologize, and hopefully you have a handout because it's kind of hard to read, but you can see the different departments that we support and how much funds go towards the expenditures in those departments. Clearly, the two main ones are police and fire, and then this is the streets, public works. And then this is administration. The rest of them are all smaller departments, but they all have costs. And I'll show you on the next slide. Here's a comparison of 2023, which is in the blue, to the 2022, which is in the red. And you can see that in most cases, the budgets are fairly flat. They should be up a little bit because of the pay increases we're giving people, but overall, you'll see that, and again, I want to stress that while it appears that we're actually giving the police department less funds than we did in 2022, the fact of the matter is that these will be better allocated funds for more effective police officers and filling up positions that sit vacant today. So the last area that I'd like to discuss is the American Rescue Plan Act. The City of Columbus was fortunate enough to receive almost $5.8 million in ARPA funds. We have unallocated right now $136,000. The other allocations, the primary project that we're focusing on is Watershed. We have $3 million allocated to that. We're, in addition to the Watershed, we're giving Water and Light a little over $1 million for their 3 primary projects that they need to get completed in the city of Columbus. And they'll get started on that once they get the word that they're getting matching funds. We give them $1,013,000. They're hoping to get matching funds from the state of Mississippi to bring that up to a little over $2 million. Once they get that, they'll be able to start those projects and get them. And they're badly needed projects. We did incentive pay for our employees, a one-time payment for our employees of both full-time and part-time, and that cost $681,000 of that. We have a project that we're looking at that needs to be done, and that's at 2nd and 10th. It's a culvert that needs to be replaced, and that money is in there. And then we'll be expanding on our blight elimination program, which will help the city clean up some of the neighborhoods and get rid of some of the old houses that need to be torn down and replaced.
That the Watershed and the culvert is for matching dollars as well.
That's correct. So the city is hoping, and we've put in an application to be matching dollars so that instead of $3 million, we would get $3 million from the state, so that we would have $6 million towards watershed projects in the city. And then that's the same for the 2nd and 10th culvert. That again is a water sewer project that qualifies for those matching funds. And we're just waiting. The state has opened up those applications. They're scoring them. It's competitive. But the good thing is that the city of Columbus clicks on a lot of the scoring. So hopefully we'll hear at some point here in the near future that they agree with the matches. And that's all I have on this. I'd be glad to answer any questions anybody may have. In fact, I'll move over there if people want to come up.
Does anybody have any questions for Jim, specifically on the PowerPoint? I will also let people know that are watching from home that we do have copies of the detailed budget up here. If somebody, it's over 35 pages, so we didn't print one for everybody, but they're here for people to get and review. You can also find them on our website. Is that correct, Joe? Is it up on the website? It's on Facebook. We will get it on the website as well, correct? Okay, so that everybody can have access to that. You can't hear me? Can you hear me now? Yes? No? Yes? What I was saying was that we have the detailed budget up here. There's several on the table up here for people to come and look at that kind of breaks it down in each category for questions. It's also on the Facebook page and will be on our website for people to see and review, as is the PowerPoint that Jim just went through. So do we have any questions at this point from the PowerPoint?
Yes, sir. Do we have a detail? No, sir. Not. It wouldn't show up.
All right, Jim, do you want to take us forward since there's no questions so far? Or Jamie?
It's fine. We'll start with the administrative budget. Are there any questions?
Yes, what's in there for the administration budget?
Can you repeat that?
What you have now for the administration budget? This is the detailed budget.
Yep.
In total for the administration is $3,108,950. That's up from $2,733,218. It's down $200,000 from 2 years ago. Last year, they cut the administrative area pretty severely when they had an error in the budget.
Can everybody hear Jim?
I think the key elements of the administration, well, I really gone over the revenue, so I don't think we need to talk about that unless people have questions. The administrative budget, the big increases, quite frankly, one is in salaries. Both Jamie and I came in at salaries that were higher than what were budgeted in 2022, so that lends to that increase. Also, the increase is adjustments for the mayor and the city council, and then the rest of the difference, and that's about 123 of the $158,000 increase, and the difference is just 4% for the other employees in the department. Another big number on here is professional services. So I want to cover what's in that. I was curious when I saw it the first time. That is that legal fees are in there, engineering fees are in there, our technology fees are in there. The breakdown of that is that engineering ends up, right now, year to date, is about $272,000. Legal fees that are for our city attorney, legal fees are about $130,000. There's a significant amount of legal fees for the bridge lawsuit that we have going right now, which hopefully will not have to be repeated in 2023, but that's what makes up that big professional services number, that and our audit costs. Insurance has stayed relatively the same, and I do want to put it in here that one of the things that I put into the administrative budget is a amount of allocation of $250,000 for special projects. The city in the past has not had a kitty for special projects, and we need that. So things like we're looking at archiving social media. We're looking at equipment for our crime lab. We have issues with almost every one of our city buildings having leaking roofs. And we have vehicles that break down almost daily. So, you know, hopefully we'll be able to start setting some money aside to address some of those issues. And it's time. You know, in the past, the city has had the habit of borrowing to cover costs. And in many cases, the loans went longer than the benefit of the asset. And we need to get away from that and be more, you'll find me to be more stubborn about borrowing when we should start building those capital reserves so that when a truck needs to be replaced or a Caterpillar needs to be replaced, that we have those funds in-house and we don't have to go borrow them and pay for 20 years on a piece of equipment that's going to last 10. The next department I want to talk about is information technology. Information technology, at the current time, we outsource that to an outside service. We intend on bringing it in. It's not that we're unhappy with the outside service as much as we feel like we need a on-location IT person. Everything we touch goes through a computer somehow, and we need to have that IT person on. We are currently recruiting for that IT person, and as a matter of fact, we have 30 or 40 applications, outstanding applications. So it's going to be a tough choice, but you know, one of the things we're going to do is take it and bring it back in-house so that we have those talents when we need them and where we need them. Everything else in information technology is pretty boilerplate. We pay for our IT servers and backups, and we pay for communications, telephones, that type of thing. So everything else is pretty much standard now. We did allocate up the capitalized equipment request of $40,000. We have some computers that are wearing out and can't handle some of the new software, and we need to replace those this next year. The next department that I'd like to talk about is the crime lab. We are very fortunate to have a crime lab in the city of Columbus. Many of the cities around us don't have a crime lab, and we contract with them to do their CSI work. And I'm really actually been very impressed with our staff there. One of the, you know, clearly they're working with old, outdated equipment. You know, we charge these other cities for the work, so the more throughput we can have, the better revenue we could do. And we need to have some updated equipment to make that happen. So depending on how the city council considers their capital and how they want to spend their capital, this is one area that I would recommend that we invest in. The people in here in this department are outstanding, and we are trying to recognize them from a salary basis this year. They have been significantly, compared to the state crime lab, they're significantly underpaid. We can't afford to move them all the way up to the state crime lab level, but we can get them headed the right direction. We don't want to lose these people, so it's important that we make an investment in them. The rest of the expenses are pretty much boilerplate.
Hey, Jim, on the crime lab, I see we had $35,000 budgeted for revenue for 2022, but in 2023 we have it budgeted for $9,000. Are we doing more money right now, or that's just an anticipation of doing it? Crime lab person?
Claudette's going to answer that one.
I'm not sure what you're looking at currently. Are you looking at the crime lab receipts further in the budget? I have no idea. That's something I don't personally know about. Is that for crime lab like the state lab?
I said, I don't know, I'm not working in the crime lab, so I don't know what it is.
Well, I'm not an accountant either, so I don't really know where it is. But I can tell you currently what we brought in, if that's the number you're asking for.
Well, I guess we would ask Jim where did that number come from, since he's the accountant.
Yeah, that number came from looking at the budget versus where we're at as of June 30th of this year. So this is my projections of where I hope that we will be.
She's saying she don't know what it's from. You saying it's
Yeah,
from-
because she doesn't see the revenue. She does the work and charges for it, but the revenue comes into to the general fund.
So you think that we're gonna go from 35,000 to 90,000 based on?
And it's based on where we are at mid-year. So mid-year, we must have been way above the 35,000. I'll have to check right here to see if I have that budget with me. But
I mean, you don't have to do it right now. We
Yeah.
can figure it out. I would like to know, see those numbers.
Why did you have it?
I have it from the invoices that I sent to finance. So currently, right now, and I'm going to budget or invoice out tomorrow, first of the month. Currently, we're at $48,320. 48.
What does that come from? Can you tell us?
What this number comes from? This number comes from actually drug analysis, cell phone forensics, and fingerprint analysis. Each analytical service is charged differently. Fingerprint analysis is $60, cell phone forensics is $200. Drug analysis, it depends on if it's a rush case, which is an expedited case, it's $150, or a regular case, which is $60.
And that's coming from us charging
Other-
other areas.
Currently, we have 30 agencies that use us. We have one agency that drives 3.5 hours one way to drop off drugs.
So with the 48,
20, would that be as at the end of July, or would that be at the end of August?
It's the end of August.
End of August.
Thank you.
No problem.
let me ask this too.
So we're talking about new equipment, leasing new equipment for them, Jim. Was that part of the 90,000? If they were having better equipment to work with, that would help increase their revenue?
Yeah, I mean, when I met with Claudette, and we talked about that, and we're looking at different ways that we might be able to afford some new equipment. Her throughput is really limited by her equipment, not her people, her equipment. So if she has 2 machines, that she can theoretically double. And, you know, we've talked about getting her 2 new machines, and that would give her 3, which if we did that, that would significantly improve the input. But one of the challenges that Claudette has is the backlog of the cases that she has. She has a certain amount of time to get that evidence analyzed and back to those cities and police departments. In this particular case, I don't know where Claudette is today, but I do know that some of them are 2 years old.
Yes, currently we are working cases that will hit their 2-year mark in September. So we are rushing to get anywhere from 30 to 60 cases done before, I guess, tomorrow, which is impossible. But grand jury doesn't start for for this county, which is Lowndes County and Columbus, until September 13th. But grand jury for Starkville and Oktibbeha County is actually the 6th. So we've been trying to get their cases out. And DeSoto County, their grand jury is September 14th. So every grand jury is different, and we're trying to work our cases to get them to them before that 2-year mark.
You bill them as you do the results, or you bill them at the end of each month?
We bill them at the end of the month only for completed cases.
So for example, you haven't billed for all this, even though your number is.
Yes.
And she doesn't have to worry about customers, unfortunately. She has plenty of business. It's just the time it takes to get it through the equipment.
That's exactly right. If you guys wanted numbers of currently our backlog, I have that. As you can see, my huge binder right here. Currently in the drug analysis backlog, we have cases from 2020. We have 8 cases from 2020. For 2021, we have 467 drug analysis cases. For 2022, we have 436 cases in our drug lab. Each year, we have increased. So from 2020, we received 968 drug analysis requests. In 2021, we received 1,084. Currently, we have 668 drug analysis requests, receiving them daily. So our backlog is not diminishing with one piece of equipment, that one GCMS. We're trying. It's just not possible. And we're trying to get those cases out before they're 2 years. And it's rough. It's rough on all of us. It's rough on the piece of equipment. It's running 24/7 for the last 2 months. And that's hard on a refurbed 2001 GCMS.
And Claudia, can you speak to the work that you're doing also that we don't charge for at this point?
Are you talking about crime scene investigation for the police department
Yeah.
or property and evidence for the police department?
Whichever thing you're doing that there's no charge.
That would be, okay. So we also do drug screens for the city. We do post-accident, pre-employment, random. We do not charge the city for that. We do crime scene investigation for the police department. If there's a complex scene or just need help with that, we sometimes get called out in the middle of the night. We go, and then when work starts the next day, we're in the lab. We don't charge for that. Property and evidence, we've handled property and evidence for the city for as long as I've been here. We don't charge for that either. And we handle dispositions, which is destruction, and going through that process. For drugs, it's MBN, but for other items, it could be through the court system, through the district attorney's office.
Is there also, do we have an agreement with
We have an interlocal agreement with the county, which is the Violence Narcotics Task Force, and in that interlocal agreement, the task force actually receives analytical services provided by the lab for free, so the cell phones, drugs, and fingerprints. And that was established in November of 2020, the 2nd,
Do
November
you
2nd.
provide dispositions as well?
Do what now?
Do you provide dispositions for the county?
We do not. We actually have to ask them their dispositions and then go through the process for the Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics for destruction.
how much time would you say that takes away from what could be potentially paid work?
Are you talking about drug dispositions? Oh gosh, those projects take a while because you have to get the disposition from the court from actually Lowndes County. Then you have to go through and find where we've put them. The narcotics bin, the CID or vault, the CID vault, the patrol vault, they are not small rooms. They are packed to the ceiling. So we go and we find that, and then we go through the process. It takes months.
I'll remind the council too that we did ask, and I'm sure y'all remember this, we did ask for state appropriations for the crime lab this past year for a little over $300,000 to try to help with equipment. And unfortunately, we didn't receive it. So one of the things that we've talked to Jim about is potentially leasing maybe some of the equipment instead of purchasing. It might be actually a better investment. Any other questions?
So we have an interlocal agreement with the Narcotics and Sheriff Department that we don't charge them, but they charge us to house our prisoners. And I think they may be going up, right? And that's not
That's
a
not a
personal
meeting.
thing. I'm just saying.
No problem. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
The next department that I'd like to bring up is the police budget. I'll tell you that the interim chief and Jamie done great work in putting together a concept where we're going to have a smaller authorized police force, larger than what we currently have today, but a smaller but better paid group that hopefully will competitive in the marketplace for these police officers.
So what we were able to do is take what was budgeted for 92 employees, bring it down to 55 sworn officers plus about 20 civilian personnel in the police department, and reallocate those funds. So we don't need additional funds. We are just going to make sure that they're allocated correctly and that we fill those positions, because even now, if we're sitting at between 25 and 30, we have a lot of additions to make to get that up to 55. And hopefully we'll be able to do it by being competitive. One increase, and Councilman Jones brought it up, is the prisoner meals and medical. That rate is going from $25 a day to $35 a day, and then it'll continue to go up, I believe, $5 a day for the next couple of years. So I've allocated $300,000. Last year was budgeted $240,000, $300,000 this year, because for the same amount of prisoners, it's going to cost us more.
Have we signed a new agreement with them already? That's anticipation of them going up, we haven't signed it. We haven't done a deal yet.
No, we haven't. Councilman Jones, Jeff has been working on the document with them, and it'll come before the council at the next meeting to vote on it. The Board of Supervisors would have to vote on it as well. He's budgeted it as anticipation, as if that is approved. But yeah, it still has to be reviewed. There were some questions that the police chief had, and a few other things. Do you want to speak to it at all, Jeff?
Sure we can. Some of the things that were in it were, for example, they said we had to pay them $7,500 a year for prisoner transport. But then the police chief pointed out that when somebody needs to be transported, they call the police department and ask them to come get them. So we had to figure that out. And there were some other expenses. I'm trying to remember what one was. It was rather technical. Anyway, I'll think of it, but there were some improvements I made where there were certain expenses that I didn't think were fair, as simple as they were, and the language I put in would save us money at the end, but I'm drawing a blank on exactly what they are today.
Yeah, and that document will also have to go to the Attorney General's office too, right?
Yes, an interlocal agreement is governed by statute. Both parties, the city and the county, would have to agree to the form and the content of the agreement. It has to be sent to the AG for approval and then filed with the Secretary of State and the Chancellor Clerk.
And I think the document explains, or at least the request explains how long we've been at that fee, correct?
It's been at $25 a day since 1996.
And I think it talks about the added expenses, obviously, since then. So, but yeah, that is what we're trying to say, is that is just pending on whether that's approved by the council and the supervisors, and then approved by the AG's office.
Does travel and training reflect, I see we went down $20,000, is that because we changed the amount of officers that we're gonna have, or?
That's correct. What travel was that?
It's for the police department.
Was that 60 and now it's down to 40? You know, some of our stuff we don't have, so y'all got y'all iPad and all those information. Some of the things we see on our
Any other questions?
The housing our prisoners going from 21 to 31, it's in contract, it have to be signed and approved. But we've been discussing the housing of our prisoners going from $21 to $31. I can understand that, things are expensive, but I'm confused that we do the labs and work through the crime lab for the sheriff's department at no fee. So is it just being kind to them and they can't be kind to us? Things cost money. And right now, the crime lab needs anywhere from $250,000 to $300,000 worth of equipment so they can be able to efficiently get their work done. So is there any plan to look at why is it they can get their work done and there's no fee for it?
As I recall, the negotiations with the sheriff's department, it was one of those rather complicated things where drug dealing takes place across county lines, and sometimes they'll be arrested in this county, but they're actually from the city, and it's a joint operation with the city and the county working together. I was an advocate for the county paying for lab testing that occurred when a person of the county was arrested by the task force, but I don't know that we would have gotten a deal. I think it's certainly logical to go back and negotiate that issue again. If they're going to ask for basically a 33% increase this year on a daily charge for a prisoner, and since we're negotiating that, it's certainly not a bad idea to negotiate the fee for analysis.
When was that put in place, do you remember?
The narcotics agreement? 2020, I think. It's on. I'm yelling nearly.
I was asking him when that agreement was set in place, and I thought it was longer. He said it was 2020, he thought. I thought it was before then.
Well, we have had one on and off. It got terminated for a while and reinstituted, terminated. I'm pretty sure it was about 2020.
My recommendation is we do have to negotiate these prison in-house fee. Can we go back and negotiate them paying for their lab fee? It's worth negotiating.
I agree with that. This is the time to do it.
Because this is not correct to me, if the drug task force that we have with the city, with the county, when they arrest somebody, they take it to the county court. So we still not getting any money from that also because it doesn't even come to city court.
That's correct, too. They take them where the sheriff is the head of the task force under the agreement, so they take them where he tells them. He tells them to take them there.
Could that be changed as well?
I mean, you can negotiate for it, that's the best way I can say. I don't know that it would be agreed to, but you don't get it if you don't ask.
Yeah, I would think it'd be something that we need to look at.
Yes.
And I think they might need to have joint control because I'm also told when the police department asks the drug task force to do something, they can't do anything unless they get approval from Sheriff Hawkins, so that leaves them a little dry in the city.
Good evening. Yes, I believe there are a few things that we need to renegotiate with the task force because I believe that the majority of the drug cases are generated in the city, generated through the city, and that's something I've been looking at and been trying to pull some of the stats as far as the cases and where they're coming from. So I'm waiting on that information to come. And also I've been questioning and asking about seizure and different things because I haven't, at least in my last couple of years here, I have not been seeing any of those funds or anything filtered back through the city from us being a combined task force. So those are some things that we need to look at and address.
The agreement does speak to how seized assets are to be divided. So if we're not getting any, then there's a problem.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments?
Time to negotiate.
It's always good to negotiate and look back over agreements. Okay, Jim, you can move forward, or Jamie?
All right, the next department that I'd like to discuss is the fire department. We are going through a process now of looking at, similar to the police department, we're looking at a schedule of salaries and pay that makes them more competitive with the area. At this time, it's a little different from the police department. It's a little more complicated than the police department because the fire department has this unusual overtime that they get because they work 24-hour shifts. And when you look at that 24-hour shift, and some weeks they work 2 of those shifts, some weeks they work 3 of those shifts. But once you reach over that 40 hours, you're into overtime. So they typically work like in a typical year for hourly folks is 2,080 hours. Their standard is 3,003 hours. So as we look at paying and we incur a significant amount of overtime with the current fire department because of the lack of staff. So as we look at filling out this staff and paying these firemen better, what we need to do is see what can be offset from the overtime that they're incurring. I don't know that we'll ever get to having an 8-hour shift. I talked to the chief about that, and one of the advantages of being a fireman right now is if you work 2 24-hour shifts, you have time to go out and work. If you've got another business, you have time to go out and work that during the week, and that's valuable for our firemen. And so I don't think we want to mess with that as much as what we want to see is if we have a fully functional staff and we're paying them a competitive rate, then we ought to be able to see overtime go down. And so Jamie and I need to work with the fire chief to get to a point where we can kind of see how much are we going to take out of that overtime number and push it up to the salary number so that we can give these people as much as we can in pay, and yet at the same time the city benefit by getting a lower overtime charge. And that's an exercise that we need to do, but on the dollar side, we're very close to what we need right now.
Well, I think that would be something that we need to figure out before we do, we go any further with the increases, because if you don't figure it out soon, then you're still gonna be paying them at the same, a higher rate now, plus more overtime.
That's
So
correct.
it's something that we're gonna have to figure out before we make those changes, I would think.
Yeah, the good news is that the dollars that are built into the budget gets us to where we need to be. The only thing is, what I want to do is make sure that as we go through this process, that we get some benefit of paying our firefighters better and having a full staff so that we see some of that overtime money move up to the salary line, and so we get a good balance.
Good evening, everyone. Chief Hughes, Columbus Fire and Rescue. Mr. Brigham, I appreciate your efforts. The overtime actually is not a true reflection of, there are some things, as you alluded to, with the way that the firefighters are paid. But also, as the council is aware, a lot of that overtime comes from the training that our firefighters have when they're requested to go on the deployments, such as the flooding in Jackson. That money is actually returned to the city of Columbus. It just doesn't, to my knowledge, go back into the overtime budget. I have been talking with Mr. Brigham and Ms. Garrett and looking at ways to address that overtime issue. As he said, as long as the department remains short, we're going to incur that overtime. But if you look at the salary, as Mr. Brigham alluded to, the department was actually lower. And if we can figure a way to get pay parity with the police department, perhaps in a similar manner by addressing the number of staffing, we're definitely open for that.
How can we, Chief, to see an engineer making more than the chief? That just don't sit well on my plate. I'm seeing, then we giving these guys raises. So I'm listening to Mr. Brigham. How is that gonna bring stuff down? We increasing raises, and now they working overtime. There's not gonna be more money that we paying out?
Actually, Councilman, the plan tonight was to raise the minimum wage of all city employees to $12.50. A firefighter makes $10.88 a year. If you raise that fee of the firefighter to $12.50, he is now making as much or more than the next rank of engineer. So the flat 4% raise creates problems. What Mr. Brigham and Ms. Garrett were doing, were looking at that situation. To address the more important question of what you had as far as the overtime, if Mr. Brigham and Ms. Garrett are successful in looking at that number, you're going to actually bring down the number of required personnel at the department. Thereby, as you and I have spoken before in the past, those positions that have to be filled, that number will be consistent. It'll just be 18 per shift. So you won't have to hire that overtime. And so being honest and transparent, overtime is going to exist, but not in the rate and numbers that it is now. Actually, this council moved and we hired 4 firefighters last council meeting.
How short are we on firefighters
Right now.
On the books, we have 57 firefighters. We were allotted for 70. But of that 57, one is actually on a military deployment. And so he's not actually here, but we have to hold that number on the books. The number that we had discussed was around 65 firefighters. Realistically, it's going to probably take us, at current salary rate that we pay, 3 to 5 years, because we hired 4, but we're probably going to lose 7 for retirement next year. So as we gain any efforts that this council takes to make the pay at the fire department more attractive, is going to help us out reducing that overtime. And we'll be able to attract talent in.
Isn't aren't we going to be more competitive with the numbers that we're looking at now? I know that y'all were looking at what other departments pay in the area.
Yes, we will be, especially with hiring new firefighters. That means the overtime that you did won't be at the same level as those who make higher salaries.
Any other questions? Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
The next department, does one point of accreditation impact?
I apologize, Councilman, if you said that question again.
Accreditation impact.
Impact the salaries or impact the overall department?
The overall department.
Accreditation does, and if you look in the aspect of what accreditation has done for the department as far as attracting personnel, it's not going to be significant. But if you look at accreditation as far as the ability to get the grants and the other opportunities that we have, keeping in mind that the last $4 million in fire trucks were funded from AFG grants, accreditation does have a large impact. Does that answer your question?
Does it have an impact on how they work?
Definitely, definitely. Not the shift, but the amount of work. Accreditation, when this department became internationally accredited, prior to that, the average number of runs we ran were around 1,800. The year that we became accredited, that run number increased to around 4,500. We've done some things to decrease the number of false runs and other calls where your firefighters really can't do anything on scene, but that call volume is still drastically higher than it would be without international accreditation.
Any other questions?
Having the ability to lower the amount of people that are on a particular shift. We talked about, was the 18 per shift is required. Does the accreditation affect that as well?
No, sir. Accreditation doesn't affect that. That is stipulated by the state of Mississippi, the insurance, the Fire Rating Bureau. As you know, Columbus is just one of the few cities in our state that has a 3 fire rating, and that is a lot heavily dependent on 2 things. That's the number of firefighters that we have per shift and our water supply within the city boundaries. The 18 number was designated by the State Fire Rating Bureau to afford that 3 rating. And that goes into Councilman Mickens' question about how many were allowed or how many were required to work per shift. That 18 number is set there. And that goes into the conversation. I'm sorry.
That affects overtime too as well?
It does.
There's a requirement of...
It does, because if you have those 18 required positions and you have to fill each one. You have to have a captain, a firefighter, and an engineer on each truck in order for that to be an effective response truck. The 18 number reflects that. I believe what we're looking at is maintaining that 18 number and not increasing it, and thereby making sure that we don't have that overtime issue as much as we have in the past.
Any other questions?
Yeah, that's the problem. I wouldn't say a problem, but something that came up in the past where if we were short a captain, they would move somebody up to that position of a captain, but now they want to be in that position so they can get paid. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, Councilman, I do. You're referring to that ride-up policy and the work policy? Yes, sir. That was something that was done to try to offset the overtime costs, but it created problems because you had personnel that weren't trained up to a level riding in that level. And when you have the lives of our citizens, we definitely want to put the best, and we want those that have been trained and competent in those positions.
I see that we have several of our firefighters here tonight. Would any of y'all like to address any of these? And thank y'all for showing up tonight. Any comments or?
If I may, thank y'all. Y'all have spoken about the raises and stuff that the fire department's giving or getting. Can you tell us a little bit about it? I mean, we know nothing. What is it? Is it just a 4% across the board, or what's the plan?
Well, it's not 4% across the board. The plan that I've received and started looking at is similar to the police plan, where we're looking at a salary schedule by rank, and then how does that compare to A, what we're paying today, and then B, making sure that it's competitive. But it's, I would guess that there, at least on the police side that I've analyzed pretty well, almost every person sworn officer was getting some sort of an adjustment increase. And it would have been more than the straight 4%. But the question on the fire department, again, I have to take a look at that with Jamie and the fire chief a little closer, because I want to make sure that we're addressing the competitiveness. A 4% increase across the board for the fire department, I don't believe will make them more competitive.
Also, I have submitted the 2022 survey of first responders that was completed by Guinness and MML, and the chief has also submitted something along those lines. So that's what we're trying to do. Like Mr. Brigham said, we just have to work with your overtime, the built-in overtime, to adjust it, but we definitely want to make you just as comparable as the police department.
And other fire departments in the area as well. The numbers that I've seen, the rough numbers are above 4% for the positions.
Okay. And you're looking at the numbers, staffing levels. I think Chief Hughes mentioned somewhere around 65. That's correct? Is that what y'all had?
Yeah, I think that's what the schedule was.
Okay. All right. Thank y'all.
And he's layered it out at each rank.
I'm sorry.
He's layered it out at each rank.
Okay. Thank you.
I just at this point, I'd just like to make a comment that as you saw earlier on the slides, police and fire are our key investments in this city. There's nothing more important to us than the security and the safety of our citizens of this city. So we're making some changes, but we're making investments. We want to have a better qualified and better paid police and fire department, and we're working through those that challenge right now. But at the end of the day, we have good leadership, and the city council and certainly the administration is behind doing whatever we can to continue to support that group. It's you know what, I mean, when we see the police car or fire truck go by, it's a matter of pride for me. So, as long as they're not chasing me. The next department I'd like to talk about is the inspection department.
The numbers on the inspection department are relatively the same as last year. No large changes, other than we are recognizing in the salary area some adjustments that needed to be made for this area, in particular the leadership of that area. And I think it's well deserved. Comes certainly with my recommendation. And other than that, everything else in this department is fairly flat and normal at this time.
I think we missed the court too, Jim. Did you skip over to the court?
Oh, did I skip? Ah, there's the court budget. On the municipal court salaries, again, that's another example of where things are fairly stable in all of the different account lines, other than, again, we're recognizing some people who, in the court system, municipal court system, with some special requests for salary increases to make that department more competitive, and recognizing the leadership in that department. But again, a lot like the inspection department, everything else is relatively flat with last year.
Here you go.
Forfeitures is greatly increased also. Are we collecting more? Are we writing more tickets, or what's the big increase on that part? Or are we not getting rid of more tickets, or what is it?
Well, good evening. We've had, with the fluctuation of officers coming and going, we have had an increase. We do have a couple of officers who do write a lot of tickets. So I would say so that we have had an increase. And with the extra monies that come in from the stimulus checks and the previous checks that was given out by the president, a lot of people have come in and paid their fines, more than what we expected that they would do. So, yes, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions on the inspection or municipal court? The next department I'd like to talk about is the code enforcement budget. That is, again, some changes in the professional services in that area, and that's primarily because of the activity that we've had in the follow-up by this department on unkept properties, and the expenses that we've incurred this year, both from an asbestos testing, but also some of the other legal fees that we have incurred. That activity is up, and it's up because, A, we have properties that need to be addressed, and the city council addresses them at each meeting. But just the activity is higher, so we're budgeting for that to continue, particularly in light of the fact that we are also increasing the blight elimination program, which hopefully those two dovetail together and work together to address some of the properties that need to be handled.
So that's why we took from 157 to 150 with anticipation that the blight program would help with some of the costs that they have.
Yeah, it's in the asbestos testing, we raised $13,000, and the professional services, which is primarily legal, we've raised $13,000, and that's based on the activity that we've had in 2022, and probably even more activity as we go into 2023 and start that blight elimination program.
And if I could say, 2022 is just under budgeted. I mean, because, you know, it's usually 6 or 8, 10 cases a month. And a lot of work has to go into it before we can go tear down a house. You've got to check title and give proper notices, and prepare summonses and post the property, etc.
And I like to look at stuff. I think the Councilman Jones said that, I just saw this myself, I skipped that. 2020 budget was 157,487, and it dropped to 150. But according to this, it's showing that it was 116 and it went up to 150. What's the?
You have a number that says what? How much?
It's like 3 different papers. I just noticed it, I'm sorry. I would have been said something. On here it's showing 157. What's the 2022 budget?
On here it's 116.
On here,
Yeah, 157. I'll mark that down, check that.
and the only reason I'm looking is the 1.5 on here last year, so I just gotta make sure.
Sure.
Everything.
That's right. We need to look at this closely. That's why we're here.
Okay, I'll check on that. The next department I want to bring up is Public Works. Interesting, well, it's not. This is the department that was most impacted by going from up to a minimum of $1,250. So when you see that large increase in payroll, that 240,000, that's a significant amount of the employees that were paid less than $12.50 per hour were in this department or are in this department. All of those employees have been brought up to a minimum of $12.50 at this point in time. The other big adjustment that I made there was on fuel. If you look on line 525, fuel, oil, and grease. Our budget was $320. We've exceeded that. I've moved that up to $400,000 with the anticipation that hopefully fossil fuels prices will continue to drop, but they're never going to get back down to the number. So I've added $80,000 to that particular budget line at this point in time. I would also point out, while it's not in this budget, we have allocated $500,000 of CARES funds for this department for new equipment. Some of that has started already, although quite a significant portion of that will happen in 2023. The next department is solid waste. I'd like to say that I've analyzed this in detail, but I haven't. But it does have a direction, and I've looked at these numbers and watched them as they've grown, and I believe that the $1,578,000, which is appropriate for the budget for 2023, the expenses continue to go up in this area. Hopefully the revenues will continue to grow too, but it's not necessarily an offset. So I have budgeted for slightly higher expenses in this area. The next department is the convention center, the charter that we're in. I think that Jamie and I have worked together on this budget. There's nothing really significant at this point in time in this budget, any significant changes. I am circling one number that I want to check, and that is I want to check that salaries for 2023 to make sure that that top number is correct, since I'm not aware that we're eliminating any positions. So.
No, we're not eliminating any.
So I'll check that to make sure that is correct. The care and maintenance is the next department. Again, I would just say that there's not a lot here, other than I do want to say that we're recognizing a couple of employees who have been longtime employees with the city. And we are doing a couple of special adjustments for those people. But other than that, everything else here is pretty much flat with the prior year. I would say that the decrease in the equipment, the last line, 725, 25,000 was allocated last year for a new automobile for this department. 7,000 is allocated this year, since we'll go to a lease program rather than actually purchasing new vehicles. The next department to talk about is planning and community development. This again, other than the fact that I want to point out that that there's an excellent, and I'll say that, an excellent employee in that department. And the reason I know that is because the outside auditors audited the daylights out of some of those grants, and she did an outstanding job with the record keeping. And you know, when I get that feedback from the outside auditors, that's kind of a treat, since I don't normally hear that. But you know, Loria, that some of you may know her, did an outstanding job. The next department I want to talk about is community outreach budget. We had I guess Jamie, she was a director, right?
Yes, a director of outreach.
And she has now left the city employment. Jamie has asked that we increase the salary of that position to $50,000 from the $35,000, and then add 2 part-time, about $7,500 each, summertime positions to accommodate some of the youth programs that Jamie came up with, and I think benefit the city. But it's those are the significant changes in this department right now.
According to this first paper, it says 2020 budget was $55,134. On here, it's showing $114,134.
That's because during the year, that original budget did not have the $50,000 program in it, plus the additional $5,000 that we did in budget amendments for this department. So we added, I believe it's 60,000 to this during the year with budget amendment to set up your program.
Yes. What he's saying is the difference that you're seeing, that's actually the adding in the youth program.
We're working on a new job description, right, for the position?
Yes. I haven't given it over to Ms. Pat yet, but we are working on a job description for the new community outreach. We want to expand some of the duties to include more than what the current position is just on.
Any other questions on the community outreach? The next department I want to talk about is the garage budget. This again is fairly straightforward, although we did do some increases in the fuel, oil, and grease cost line, and you know, we brought the police equipment supply line down to address the fact that we'll have some new squad cars. So hopefully those won't require as much maintenance through the garage as the older cars that we have in the fleet right now. We upped the fire equipment budget a bit because we've had some challenges with our fire trucks. The next department I'd like to discuss is the Appropriations Budget. The Appropriations Budget, for those that don't know, it's the money we set aside in our annual budget to support some of the community organizations, such as the top one here is the Red Cross or the library, Humane Society, Boys and Girls Club, and at this point in time, we have some that are traditional that we pay every year. We have had some new requests, and the Redevelopment Authority has a new request, and actually it's an old request that they're renewing. We haven't allocated anything to them for a couple of years, and they're back asking for $55,000 this year. The library has asked for an increase. And there may have to make an adjustment based on that.
11,000.
Yeah, an adjustment there to take that up to 300,000. Let me circle that.
I'm sorry, I'm Erin Busby, the director of the library system, and I just wanted to mention the request that we're asking for, and y'all mentioned, that these appropriations, a lot of these agencies are charities. We are considered local. It's kind of weird, like we fall within, it's a really weird realm. We get funding from the city and the county. We get a very small amount from the state as well, but we do have a contract that lists us as a joint agreement between the city and the county funding the library system. So we are requesting an additional $11,000 to bring us up to $300,000 to assist us with programming and outreach, and then also the city owns our building, so we are also looking to replace some flooring right now because our building is coming up on 50 years old, and we've got some tile that has just busted up and broken. We're working with our Friends of the Library group to replace our circulation desk, and that is a huge expense, so they're thankfully helping with that, but like this $11,000 is going to help us with flooring, programming and outreach. We're trying to do more outreach to the nursing homes. We've had a lot of requests from them to bring our services out there, and that requires some technology that we don't have on hand currently. So that's what this funding request of $11,000, and the extra $11,000 would be for. And so nobody has come through and told us our elevator is, we keep hearing, they're making the rounds, coming yet. It still functions perfectly fine. So we do have maintenance in our budget where we pay monthly for the elevator company to come. They check the pressure, they do the adjustment, any issues that we have, we call them. And it does function fine right now, so.
They did provide the letter. Increase and ask for an increase. First, I'll make sure I ask what's the reason why.
The question, Councilman.
I'm showing it being the same. I must be looking at.
Updated sheet.
We got an updated sheet.
It's the sheet to your right by yourself.
Oh, wow. And it looks like they've spent 90 to this point. And then And Jamie said she's gonna check and get an answer for that for us.
Yes, I'll have that answer for you Thursday.
That's a reminder that we'll be back here on Thursday doing this again.
If I might add to, the Humane Society is a charity, but you have a contract with them to house animals picked up by animal control. So it's really not like a charitable donation like the rest of the appropriations.
I think you'll also have a chart that Jamie sent out that highlights the groups that have asked for an increase. Did y'all see those?
Red Cross has asked for an increase from $12,500 to $20,000. The library from $289,000 to $300,000. The Boys and Girls Club from $12,000 to $25,000. And the Hitching Lot Farmers Market from $15,000 to $17,600. And we have a new funding request from United Way of Lowndes and Noxubee for $15,000. Building Bridges of Hope removed their funding requests. Yes.
What is the total increase of appropriations?
It's about $200,000.
So, I guess the big question would be, will we have to raise the millage in order to get all this stuff? Raises, appropriations, all this stuff, would we have to raise millage?
Jamie, was there any that didn't want the money?
Well, there was 4 organizations that I haven't been able to, that never sent anything in. I haven't been able to get in touch with them, but they were the smaller funding requests. That one from E911, that one is huge. That's $175,000, so that's pretty much all of the $200,000 difference.
Just so you know, so $200,000 increase is $1 million.
All these increases. We went from last year where we had $1.5 million mistakes spoken, and we couldn't give any raises. Now we're giving everybody raises across the board, increases in salary, appropriations increase, all this within this amount of time. And I just want to know why we're going to have to raise the millage in order to do it.
Well, if this is $200,000, it's $200,000 that eats into the $500,000 surplus. So, I mean, these are decisions that we'll have to make, but if you were asking me, do we have the money for the extra? We probably do for the library, $11,000. I'm not sure that we have $175,000 for each.
Well, no, I don't mean just for individuals. I mean like total wise. Do we have money to total, to balance this budget without raising taxes on people?
Yeah, what he's asking, Jim, is, you put in for 1% mill increase, but you could actually do this without that, correct? You just wouldn't have the surplus that we're talking about. Is that right?
If we did not do the 1 mil and we did this, we would be very close to just a break even, meaning that we would have no buffer if something on the revenue side didn't occur properly.
I think we might have to take a look at a lot of things because personally, I don't want to raise taxes. I know we're going to have to raise them for the school because the schools are requesting quite a bit, I do believe. And for us to raise, taxes on people, I just don't think it's going to be the right time. So I think we're going to have to go back and look at some stuff seriously.
Well, not only that, what we have to take into consideration, we raised 2 meals last year. And here we coming back again, raising another meal on the people. And I just think we're putting too much on them. I think if we're gonna be fruitful, like the mayor, one of his words he used, and being diligent with the citizen money that we're handling, I don't think we need to raise no meal this year. I'm agreeing with Councilman Jones and with Councilman Green. We need to cut so we can make this budget work. That's what we need to do. And I don't see no improvement in appropriation. Go back with what we had in 2022 on the appropriation.
So your meal request is included in this budget?
Is what?
Is the
Yes.
action of the raising of the taxes been included in this?
Everybody, all raises things in there.
And on top of that, what the school asking for? What we got to give the school system here, the district? How many meals is they asking for this year?
They're going up at least to, I believe, right around 65 from 62.
5 meals.
No, it's 3 or 4 meals. 3 or 4 meals, I think.
What do you think?
3 or 4.
3 or 4 meals, and we want to put a meal on top of that, so each meal is running about at least $50 or more each meal.
If you're asking my opinion, if we want to not raise taxes, so we keep the mill rate at the same as last year, we can do that, but we can't do both. We can't offer all of this extra community funds and not raise taxes.
But you're gonna have to raise taxes because of the school board's budget. I mean, you're gonna have a millage increase.
Oh, yeah,
Yes.
that tax increase is gonna happen whether we're involved with it or not.
But it won't be coming from the city, it will be coming from the school. That's what we can do about that.
That's true, but you're the levying authority. The school district sends what their budget is, and then the city council levies the amount.
Which gives the comparison of that. We were talking about that the other day.
And that's another thing on its own.
Yes.
We met, we talked with nobody. I feel like it's totally disrespectful that the board did not talk to the mayor and council about what they're doing going forward. That was totally disrespectful. Totally. They should have talked to us. That should have been discussed. To do 3 meals at one time, no, that's too much. That's too much. Way too much. There was no consideration in the people. They did not think about the people of the citizens of this city. I'm through for tonight.
Can you address that, what we were asking about?
I'm not sure I can address, actually. There was an article in the Dispatch on August the 16th that said the school district's fiscal year request was 4% more than last year, which is $608,000. But I spoke to Mr. Brigham right before the meeting, and he said that doesn't include the bonded payments, which would bring it on up to about $800,000 or $900,000 or more.
Which is a different mill, yes.
Yeah, so then you're looking at 3 or 4 mills, if that's correct, and I assume it is.
But what I'm talking about is if you talk about the rate of the millage, for the school system versus the city, the level.
Yeah, I'm not the right guy to answer that. I'm a liberal arts major.
No, we were talking about it the other day. Does somebody have that number? The difference in the...
School district mill rate is $218,000 per mill. The city's mill rate is $195,000 per mill.
Yeah, that's it.
Jim, what would be the most that they could raise a meal without having a referendum, taking it to the people? What the most they can raise it before we approve it?
I believe it's 10%.
What do you say?
Well, it's a little more complicated than that. They have the right, as I understand it, to raise it 4 mills annually, and the city council can't do anything but levy that amount. But if it's between 4% and 7%, then if the electorate can gather 1,500 signatures, then they can send it to a referendum. And if it's more than 7%, then an election would have to happen, as I understand the law. And I was asking about this about 3:30 this afternoon, so I haven't studied it as well as I would like to before I start giving my opinion, but I'm pretty sure that's correct. It's section 37, 57, 105, and 107.
And they can ask for previous budgets as well, correct? Back up to 3 years?
Yeah, it's kind of complicated on that. It says, you know how the legislature is. If it was
Yes.
easy, anybody could do it. But it's a blended figure about the 3-year past amounts. I have a hard time explaining it. I could read it, but it would probably put everybody to sleep and nobody would understand it then.
So Jim, do you have those figures in front of you, what that total would be for the numbers that would increase for the school board? And I will remind everybody that the school board did have an open meeting like this to discuss the meal. I attended, got the information, brought it back to Jim. It's been in the newspaper too. And you'll probably remember too that the school board has been wanting to raise this for several years now. I don't know if several is the right, but it's been a while. And so there's also this side that, this is needed for the children. So Jim, do you have those numbers?
Well, I have the ad valorem request worksheet. I talked with Holly Rogers from the school district this afternoon, just to make sure that I was fully understanding their requests. So their request for operations is $11.4 million. That $11.4 million so that just on operations puts them at about 52.5 mil. On top of that, they have general obligation bonds of 2.4 million. Which is another 11 mil. And then on top of that, they have a 3 mil 10 to 20 year notes of 630,000, and that ends up being just about 2.79 mil. So I mean, you're at 13 plus, I mean, you're 64, 65 mil is what they're gonna have to ask for based on the worksheet. And I asked Holly if she had computed the mill rate. She told me the school district doesn't deal with mill rates. They just deal with the dollars that they want. And so, converting it back to the mill rate ends up being my responsibility because it goes on the sheet.
And that's always been the case, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what's confusing about the article, and based on that and this article that was in the paper.
But the one in the paper, I looked at that too, and I think they were leaving out the percentage.
I think they were completely leaving out debt.
Yeah, they were leaving out the debt.
But if you add what the paper reported, which leaves that out, and you add that to what the school millage was, that brings you up to 64.15. So you're looking at another 2 mils on top of that, I'm thinking, based on what you said. What I'm saying is, the current school millage is 62.91. The dispatch article said the rate with the request of 608,000 would bring the millage rate up to 64.15, which is only a 1.2 mil increase. But if that leaves out the debt service number, then there's going to be another 1 or 1.5, 2 mils added to that.
Spending is right around 65, between 65 and 66 mils.
So, where that leaves you is.
And they were 62 mils last year.
3, 4, we in there.
No,
You have to approve up to 4.
The children are our future, so. Stephen loved the kids. back to my point though, it's about all the other stuff that we're looking to increase on, so we're gonna have to definitely take a look at that. And, we give it to the kids, and Rome wasn't built in a day, so we can't do all these increases in one time. And we just have to look at some other stuff next year. I do hold steadfast in what I said with the public works though. I mean, we should have no employees that's working for $10 an hour. So that is a main concern on getting them a raise to $12.50. But some of this other stuff that we have in here, we're gonna have to take a look at.
Well, just so you know, we're okay about not raising taxes until we get to this appropriations. With these appropriations increases, it cuts deeply into the whatever surplus we're going to have. So, I mean, if your recommendation is that something has to give, I believe it has to give on this page. I would certainly encourage working with Jamie that if somebody doesn't ask for it, we probably shouldn't be giving it to them, or if they haven't taken it. And then what we have to look is how much does that move money around? But I mean,
If they don't ask for it, we definitely shouldn't give it to them. If they do ask for it, it doesn't mean that we have to give it to them. So we might have to take a look at it seriously.
Well, I think we also need to look at, are some of these duplications of services, are they serving the same group? And that's,
which one?
a huge expenditure. And also, we pay increase for elected officials, $60,000. I mean, that to me is.
Well, at least half of it is going to your mayor, so.
What now?
At least half of it is going to your mayor, so.
We don't have to do that.
Oh,
What I'm
okay.
saying, that is not something that's $60,000.
I think all of the things that's why we had this meeting tonight, was for everybody to see it and have these type of discussions. This, as we've always said, this is the taxpayers' money. We need to be good stewards of this. That's why we're having these meetings, and we hope people will tune in and also study the numbers and give us input and feedback. It is a working document that we need to report on throughout the year. I think it would be good for us to have meetings like this mid-year to kind of give an update and see where we are with the budget. These are important decisions to be made. I know that the organizations that have asked for support are doing good in the community. However, as we were looking through the request, we get more details from some organizations than we do others. And so I think it is incumbent of us to look and ask for them to, give us a budget and how those dollars are going to be benefiting the citizens. So these are all good questions. The proposal that Jim had of $1 million increase, that would have been an extra $195,000 from ad valorem taxes. The council has expressed some real concern about raising the taxes. We're trying to get the numbers to compare us to other municipalities our size and in the area. So all these are good questions and answers we need to come back with. Any other questions? We're coming in on the 8 o'clock hour, 8 p.m.
We haven't done Parks and Rec.
Oh, did we not do Parks and Rec? Well, let's do.
Which one did you want to do? Oh. What's that? No, but they're the next department we want to talk about is Parks and Recreation. If you heard the director at the last meeting, we have an issue between the Smart Vision budget and the budget that's in the budgeting software. And when I looked at that, it really was one of detail just being rolled up, not necessarily any difference. So at this point in time, I've spread that out so that the director's a little more comfortable. with those numbers. There's, I'm not sure that there's any particular line item that is significant, although I know that he just sent me a schedule this afternoon that he wanted to move some money around between line items. So I'll have to take a look at that and have that updated for you on Thursday, but I don't know how much the difference. Do you have that? Did he increase? Huh? Oh, then it's pretty much a flat budget. It's just moving money between expense lines, depending on, and I'll take a look at his detail to make sure that I'm in agreement.
Greg, would you like to say something?
As Mr. Jim said, you know, we found in the meeting there was a problem with Smart Fusion. And in that Smart Fusion, I'm not comfortable in saying that, you know, the numbers that are presented in Smart Fusion and on the budget that you have that's been posted is not the same. And I was talking to Mr. Green earlier. For example, like in my utilities, you put in $5,000 for utilities when it's already over by $2,400. And it's like $5,000 is not going to pay that in a year. And there are several line items that I think that we just need to sit down and go over again to make sure that these numbers are right, because as on my version of Smart Fusion, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 line items, 9 line items that it's not matching up with what's on the actual budget that's out there. And I think that we could possibly sit down and come up with a solution, because it's really not showing what I'm asking for in the budget.
Mr. Lewis, you probably haven't had a chance to check your email, but maybe about an hour ago I sent you an email from Greg Drake showing that Smart Fusion is running the script tonight. So hopefully we'll have a change in the morning.
Okay. Thank you.
Any questions for Greg while he's here? Thank you, Greg. Are there any other questions or comments before we adjourn? Again, I would encourage folks to reach out to us if you've got questions or concerns. We're here to do the people's business, and we appreciate everybody that showed up tonight and tuned in online. And we'll see you back here Thursday at 5 o'clock next time, not 6.